on blast.
This is week 12 of I'll Name This Football Pod Later on the On Blast Podcast Network. As always, available on Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, Google Play, and on YouTube. Tell your friends. My name is Sheldon Alexander, and as always, week to week, I'm joined by my dude, Mr. Matt Russell, sports betting professional and host of the Windows Sports Betting Podcast. Mr. Russell, it's Wednesday right now that we're doing this.
Yeah.
There's 3 games on Thursday. We're giving thanks for football this week, are we? Or are we a little tired and groggy because it's Wednesday morning at 9 a.m.?
It does feel a little week 11-y still. I'm not going to lie to you. But I'm excited, man. This is the day. This Thanksgiving Day is always the day. And you know this. You know, you've known me for a while. I take it off of work. I call in sick from school, right back from when you were a kid. Just, cough. It's a little bit too much. Gotta maybe shut this one down for the day. Oh, there's football on today. I had no idea, Mom. That works out well then for my tickle in the throat. And so you might want to be a little bit easier on that nowadays, right? You don't want to start, you don't want to get labeled. You don't have to have a quarantine hit you if you call in sick. So let's make sure it's something, non-symptomatic in this case. But yeah, man, I'm fired up, man. Thanksgiving, it's the best.
Fired up and ready to go for week 12. And after week 11, I'll say my record 6-8, bringing me to an even 78-5. Just fitting for how this season goes. And last week was a weird week because I keep trying to avoid the blow up. And I feel like last week was the blow up week for a lot of people. So being 6-8, I'm not horribly upset because there's still so many weird things that happen that, hey, it's football. So we just try to move on, and we're here to begin week 12 with some Thanksgiving goodness. I don't know if it's goodness, but we'll get to the games.
Yeah, we'll see about that.
We start with the 4-6 Lions hosting the 3-7 Texans. I don't know how good that will be, but I'll be there and watching, and I'll be rooting for Deshaun Watson and the Texans, who are 3-point favorites in Detroit. And last week he reminded everyone just how good he is and can be. And I know it was the Pats, but Deshaun did his thing, and they got their 3rd win of the season, their first win against someone other than the Jags, and they kick off the Thanksgiving against the Lions, who are dealing with injuries and got shut out by the Panthers and their backup QB. Shouts to the XFL, by the way. But I can't believe I'm saying this. I'm on the Texans. What's your thoughts here to kick off Thanksgiving?
Yeah, so a couple things before we get into the games. Number one, you're 6-8-1. I think 6-8-1, correct? 6-8.
6-8 last week.
If there's ever such thing as a good 6-8, it was definitely last week. So if you're sitting there watching the show and going like, man, I got absolutely smoked last week. Guess what? Just about everybody did. Now I say that. Little bit of a not so humble brag here. We ended up going...
No. Hold on. For the record, the 6-8, the 6 I got correct. We were really correct. And by we, I mean you, right? Because let's be frank here for a second here. When you're putting out best bets, it's a different game that we're playing.
Different game.
I'm the clown that's here trying to get every single game right and not weighing the picks at all. So when the 6 I get right, I get to say, hey, we were really right on a bunch of things. But you were really, really right with, if I'm not mistaken, a 4-1 record last week.
Yeah, exactly. And it's less about the 4-1 record. It's more about in the contest, circa million or the super contest in Las Vegas, right? The big money contests in Vegas where you have to pick 5 games against the spread. The consensus last week, right? The 5 most popular picks against the spread last week went 0-5. So if you did better than 0 and something, you did pretty well last week. We made a huge jump in the contest. We hopped up from about 456th out of 3,600 up into 105th, right? We made a 350 place jump in a contest that pays out the top 50 people. Again, 3,600 people in this contest, and we're sitting right there. And that just goes to show sort of what of a rough week that was for people, even people who are willing to spend $1,000 on a contest entry. So these people, in theory, know what they're talking about.
Yeah. No, I hear you. I hear you. But what are we talking about when we look at the
Yes.
Texans here to kick
Right.
off Thanksgiving? Because I don't know how the circa contest works in terms of
Sure.
Thanksgiving games,
Right.
and I don't know which one of these games you're feeling
Yeah.
very confident about.
Right.
But I
And
have zero confidence in the Detroit Lions in
yeah.
any way, shape, or form after they got shut out last week. I like the Texans -3. Am I like way off here?
No, and thank you for getting me back on track. The
Hey, that's
point
all
is
right.
where eventually I was going to, find myself getting back to is I have to admit right up front for these Thanksgiving games,
Mhm.
I'm kind of a write-off when it
Yeah.
comes to handicapping these games, and I'll tell you why, right? I mentioned the Circa Million contest, and you're right, if you select any of these games, I'm not sure why you would want to. You do have to select your games for the rest of the week, which means you're committing to
Oh,
Sunday games
oh,
on Wednesday, which is a no-go for me. So it
yeah,
essentially just becomes all about Circa Survivor, which, as we've talked about, the fun wrinkle in the Circa Survivor contest, Derek Stevens, the owner over there, is a huge Survivor guy. Like, that's his thing. And he
yeah.
owns a place, and he's like, we're making a Survivor contest because I love it, but we're going to add Thanksgiving as its own week. So everybody's into the pool. And listen, it's quite a nice pool over at Circa, but everybody's into the pool here having to make a pick in one of these three games. And like, if anybody who's listening to this probably knows the schedule by now, it's kind of rough. So that's all anybody's talking about when it comes to this Thanksgiving. So, it looks like, and, a little plug for the Window podcast comes out later today on Wednesday. We'll announce with my guest, Dave Tooley from the Vegas Stats and Information Network,
Mhm.
we'll announce what our pick is. Now, if it were just up to me, I would say it's the Pittsburgh Steelers. It's the biggest spread on the board. There's a ton of other reasons beyond that. But the point is if we're taking Pittsburgh, I'm really just cheering for the underdogs in the other two games because people are going to be on the Texans, like you said. Because why
Yeah.
would you ever use the Texans in Survivor if not for this time? And a lot of people have already used Pittsburgh. Of course, they've had a ton of big spreads, obviously undefeated. And so there's not that many people left with the Pittsburgh still to use. So their choices right now are kind of like between Dallas and Houston. So listen, I agree with you. I can't even imagine putting a bet in on Detroit at this point. The look-ahead line did have them favored by a little bit, but of course the
Yeah.
injuries have piled up. Frankly, they've probably quit on their coach. The one thing that I'll say is, and I do this crazy thing, and in some cases this is, so far out of the box, I watch all the games. And when you look back at that Detroit Lions game against
Yeah.
Carolina, there was a play. And I'm a big, knife or fork in the road type guy, right? Where it's like second quarter, there could be a critical play that changes the game entirely. And in this case, it was the third quarter, Detroit and Carolina, and Matthew Stafford hits Marvin Jones Jr. for a touchdown, like 60-yard bomb, beautiful play, right? Flag on the play. And it wasn't holding or something that like distinctly, changes what happened on the play. It was one of the worst penalties that you can have, in my opinion, illegal formation. Because an
Oh,
illegal formation penalty, like, one, almost never has anything to do with the play. The defense doesn't even realize you're in an illegal formation because oftentimes, and in this case, it's because one guy was one step closer to the line of scrimmage than he should have been. In this case, it was Jones. So the flag, the 60-yard touchdown gets called back. Instead of it being 14-7, right? It's still 14-0. They obviously go backwards. A sack then happens, and they have to punt the ball. So you do wonder against that Carolina team, like what the difference would have been if that game's 14-7. Right? Versus 14-0 and having to punt the ball. So when you look at the scoreboard and you look at the box score, in this case, the box score is hideous. But if you're throwing another 60-yard touchdown into that mix, it starts to look a little bit better for the Lions. Are they going to get a couple of guys back? Yes. Doesn't look like they're going to get our main guy, Kenny Golladay, back this week. Still some injuries on the defense. So, I completely understand. Everybody's going to be on the Texans. It's moved up from 2.5 to 3. So that would sort of make me a little queasy there. I think if I had to, I would say Detroit +3. But part of it is admitting your biases, right? And in this case, because of the Survivor action that's happening, I am completely biased. I desperately want Detroit to win this game. I don't don't necessarily know how much, as in how many people are taking Houston, but I expect it to be a lot. And so when you're going through the season like this, as a professional bettor, when you're in contests and all of this other stuff, especially this deep with a survivor pick, and people out there know if they had to pick a survivor team on this Thursday, they'd be just completely handcuffed, and they would understand that, like, all I want to see is Detroit win this game, but I've seen enough Thursday Thanksgiving games in my day to know that Detroit's probably not going to win this game.
And at least maybe Matt Stafford might actually be playing in this rare Thanksgiving game, as normally we've been treated survivors.
We've been
treated to a bunch of random Detroit QBs in this Thursday Thanksgiving special.
David Blau last year, right? That name again is David Blau.
Right? Exactly. So I'm going to plug my nose and take the Texans and move on and continue to plug my nose and take the Dallas Cowboys as 3-point favorites, as they are 3-7 against a 3-7 Washington football team. And I will say, last week you sniffed out the Texans win. You also sniffed out the Cowboys win against the Vikings. And we're giving thanks for this NFC East clash to entertain us midday on a Thursday. Right. But the last time the Cowboys were against the Washington football team was when your man's Andy Dalton got concussed. The Washington football team, do I really have to keep saying Washington football team? Like, it just seems the football team, there's something shorter I got to say here, right? Washington. But anyways, Andy Dalton got concussed. Washington went on to win that game. And now Andy Dalton is back. Again, plugging my nose. I don't like taking Dallas as 3-point favorites at all. But they have the playmakers. Andy Dalton, as we talked about when he first got injured, when Dak first got injured, Andy Dalton is serviceable. The Cowboys have the playmakers. CeeDee Lamb, maybe they might have figured something out, just trying to get him the ball. And last check, Washington is still quarterbacked by your man's Alex Smith. For that reason, I'm on the Cowboys back-to-back weeks. Am I crazy here?
Well, I don't think you can be. Like, that's the thing about these games, right? I don't know. Yeah. Like you said, you hold your nose and take the Texans. It's like, what's the alternative? Also holding your nose and taking Detroit? Like, holding both noses? Like, I don't know. Here's the thing. One, like, can you believe we're in a world where Alex Smith and Andy Dalton is the matchup on Thanksgiving? Like, we could have made a mint if we had bet that was even going to happen. Here's the thing, right? They both come off of, relatively big wins, right? Mm-hmm. And it's funny, like, this NFC East just gets more and more interesting, even if it's a bit of a horror show, right? But these teams are starting to play a little bit better here, both Washington and Dallas, basically everybody other than the Eagles in the NFC East. And so always comes back to the Eagles. So here's the thing, right? Yes, Dallas, massive win, right? We saw that one coming to a degree. We knew that they were live going into that game. Now it's a switch of roles, right? Now we're favored by 3 points here against a Washington team that has it going a little bit from an offensive standpoint, right? Like, Alex Smith is finally getting into a groove. Now, I don't know what the difference would have been if Joe Burrow had stayed healthy in that game, right? Like, 2-point game. At that point, still could have gone either way. Washington was going to have good field position, even if Burrow was able to walk off the field on that third down where he got hurt. The Cowboys defense still not very good, right? Like, they're getting the talent back so that they're able to make individual plays. And I think, listen, that's the NFL in its entirety, right? It's like, how good is your defense? Not from a yards against standpoint, but like, can you turn the ball over? Can you make plays on third down? And so they were able to make just enough plays to let the Cowboys offense, which again is now starting to use the playmakers, like you mentioned, CeeDee Lamb, what a catch. And so I think there's going to be offense there, but I also think there's going to be offense on the Washington side of the ball. So I've already acknowledged that I'm completely biased. If we're not taking Pittsburgh, it probably means we're taking Dallas, which is like, oh God, right? But if it were up to me, I think I like Washington plus the 3 points. Now, I like Dallas. I think Dallas is better than people give them credit for. I just think in this one game, they're actually getting that credit in the marketplace from a point spread standpoint, right? Like, this was never really going to be 3.5. So last week when the line opened up at -1, I was like, oh, Dallas -1. Like, I love that bet. Like, let's make that bet right now. And of course, sure enough, all it took was a win against Minnesota to bump that thing up to 3. So they're getting full credit for how good, I use good with some quotation marks involved, how good I think they're going to be throughout the rest of the way here. And I think as sort of an auxiliary thing, I might swing by the sports book and make a bet on the Cowboys to win the NFC East, because somehow we've gotten full circle here where it was they were like 20-something to 1, and now all of a sudden they're back in the mix here. And, listen, I wish I had grabbed them when they were 20-something to 1, but I think this is a team that's got some momentum. So, I'm not averse to you saying, okay, I'm going to take Dallas, because I think I would be with you if the line was a little bit better here. But at +3, and listen, this is sort of a traditional spot where Washington comes in and ruins the Cowboys' Thanksgiving, right? Ghosts of Colt McCoy from a couple of years ago as well. And so, again, completely biased. If I had to sort of step away, I think I would like Washington +3, but I think the over is actually a little bit more interesting if you're looking to sort of bet something in this game.
I gotcha. And in the Thanksgiving nightcap, the 10-0 Pittsburgh Steelers, 5.5-point favorites against the 6-4 Ravens. Now, the Ravens are dealing with major COVID issues, and I have to be honest, I hate now that this number has gone up to 5.5, because I was loving the Steelers at 3. I would have been all over them at 3 points. I probably wouldn't have been alone. I'm assuming that probably would have been the public side. Everyone would have been on the Steelers because the Ravens don't look good. Like, everyone's like pushing each other to get off the Ravens and the Lamar Jackson bandwagon at this point. 5.5 points makes me hesitate. It's a lot of points. But what do you make of this game, essentially, that could be a kitchen sink game for the Ravens? If they don't win this game, I mean, things are getting tough. But what do you make of this one?
It's definitely a kitchen sink game, right? It's but how much stuff do they have in the kitchen? Like, is it just the kitchen sink, or do they have more stuff that they can throw at the Steelers here, right? And you go back to the first meeting. A lot of people say, well, and I would say that as well, right? We talked about it. Baltimore should have had that game won by halftime. They were the better team on the field for the first half. Now they let Pittsburgh stay in it, and Pittsburgh was every bit as good as Baltimore in the second half. In fact, a little bit better, right? And so they blew that opportunity to win the game, but it doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be able to repeat that, a month later, right? Like, so the handicap doesn't really work like, okay, they did well in this game, now it's going to work here, right? Like, teams make adjustments, Pittsburgh can make adjustments. By the way, obviously we've talked about this in the past, the Ravens' injury issues piling up, and now you start throwing in the COVID stuff, right? And you're right, this has bumped the line from 3 all the way up to 5.5. And so fundamentally, I would say that's probably an over adjustment, right? Like, there's a ton of value there at 5.5, maybe even come game day we get 6. Yeah. That being said, it's the same theme from the last 2 games, right? If we are on Pittsburgh here in Circa Survivor, all bets are off. Literally, I will not bet a thing on Thursday for the first time maybe in like 20 years, because I will have so much emotional and sort of obviously tangential wagers here. Yeah. Into this, right? So like the Pittsburgh thing, it does feel a little bit like we're set up for just a world-class disappointment when Baltimore goes in there and stuns them, and it's Al Michaels and Chris Collinsworth. Al, like, I can't believe they did it. Like they look so bad.
This is the Lamar Jackson MVP that we are used to seeing.
Like, Al, like, this is crazy. Like, against Tennessee, and you're just like, yeah, how did we get here, right? Because again, this Steelers undefeated thing, like on the surface, you go, you know what? I'll take an undefeated team. And if we lose because the undefeated team finally lost, like, I can sleep at night, which is why I think Pittsburgh is the pick, to win outright. But it just does sort of feel like one of those, like you said, kitchen sink. Somehow they pull it off, trick plays, who knows? Yeah. The one thing that I'm sort of, going to be able to sleep at night tonight going into this game is that Pittsburgh has just owned Lamar Jackson. Yeah. Right? They, if there was ever a figure him out type of thing here, it's Pittsburgh has done it. And so, not only are we, if you're betting the Ravens here, not only are you betting them to sort of, get by the fact that their facility's been closed and they're missing a bunch of guys, not necessarily all that critical of guys though, right? Like running backs, like not that important. Pretty important to Baltimore, admittedly, but, in general, not that important. And so you just go, I think you have to take the points if you have to bet the game. But again, we don't have to bet the game. So for me, it's going to be the Steelers and just hang on for dear life. I fully expect this to be like a 3-point game and just losing years off my life.
Yeah, I mean, I see it in that way too. And as I lean towards it, sometimes I end up on the wave that you're on in terms of I'm emotionally picking these games. I'm not going to bet money on it, but if I'm picking the game, I'm going to go with my emotions.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to full on want to root against the Ravens. So,
well, and as a member, by the way, of the entry in Circa Survivor, you do have quite a stake in these games.
This is what I'm saying. Like, I want no parts. I don't want to cheer for Lamar Jackson at all in any situation. So just lose, get blown out, lose by a touchdown, lose by 2 touchdowns. Let's go. Now, if you're listening for my pick advice on Thursdays.
Well, that's why I'm apologizing, right? Yeah, if you're here to see who I like, I'm like, I don't know. Teams.
You've been warned. I'll say that much. Much. All right, as we get to Sunday's action, the big boy matchup on Sunday, the 9-1 Chiefs as 3.5-point favorites in Tampa Bay. I think on the first episode of this pod, I said something to the effect of Pat Mahomes reminded us why he signed for $500 million in the offseason. Again, that's $500 million with a B. Okay. We forgot as public narrative shifted to Josh Allen for MVP. And yes, I will take every chance I get to throw shots at Josh Allen. But anyways, huge comeback win for Pat Mahomes and company in Vegas. Now they head to Tampa Bay. And I'll continue to say this. If you get pressure on Brady, you win. Can the Chiefs get pressure on Brady? That is my question to you.
Yeah.
As I look at this 3.5-point spread, I'm on the Chiefs just because Brady, man, I don't know what's going on. Yeah,
you watch that game on Monday, right? And you go like, how, like Brady's washed. Like I made the comparison. Like I think he and Joe Flacco, the only difference between he and Joe Flacco is recruiting ability, right? Like at this point, like Tom Brady's Jimbo Fisher. And for those non-college football fans out there, right? He's used to be the coach of Florida State and coach of Texas A&M, who's like this incredible recruiter, has all this talent. And, they're in the mix this year for the national championship because he can bring in good guys, right? And that's what Tom Brady did, right? Joe Flacco doesn't have that flex, right? He doesn't have any talent around him and has no say on whether he can bring that in. So we sit there and we watch, and he's a statue, and he, a lot of check down stuff, right? Like we're firing balls here to Leonard Fournette. Like that's the situation we're at here. When we talk about these, weapons on different teams, again, watch the games, because if they're not going to use those guys on every single play, what's the point of having them, right? Like Leonard Fournette in the pass game is ludicrous.
I just want to say, as a Mike Evans fantasy football owner, when you're bombing it to Mike Evans and it's working, like you're passing it to him early in the game and it's working, and then for some reason in the second half, you're like, you know what we're going to do? We're going to try to get Antonio Brown involved and just keep throwing it to Antonio Brown. For what reason? I don't really know. But sure, let's keep trying to force feed Antonio Brown into this. Godwin's trying, but we know he's wearing a deformed glove because his finger's messed up still. But sure, sounds like a great idea. You know who's really good? Mike Evans. You know how I know that? Because I've watched Jameis just throw it up to Mike Evans for 3 years and be a pretty successful offense.
Sure. I mean, Evans had his challenges, though, against Jalen Ramsey.
I'm being salty.
Like, he had his challenges. It got really close a couple of times. There was some sketchy pass interference penalties. I get, throw it to Antonio Brown. Throw it all day to Antonio Brown. Just stop throwing it to Leonard Fournette, right? And so the point is like he's either throwing little check down passes, or he's doing the thing where he's like, I'm dropping back and I'm firing it deep, and I don't really care where the safety is. I don't really care what the coverage is. And that's Joe Flacco, right? The pass interference, offense that Joe Flacco has been running for a long time. So the point is you go, man, I don't want anything to do with this team. Like Brady looks washed, all of that stuff. And maybe it was just past his bedtime. I don't really know. Point is, it's going to be easier for them against the Chiefs from a defensive standpoint, right? Like the Chiefs let Derek Carr walk it up and down the field twice this season, right? And have let other guys, Teddy Bridgewater. Like if Brady just stays within the offense, they're going to be able to move the ball down the field. If he doesn't do the arm punt strategy where he just throws it straight in the air, like they're going to be fine from an offensive standpoint. And listen, the Chiefs are great. The $1 billion is great. It's winning them a ton of games. But like, where are the covers, right? Like we're still looking at a team here that's getting a couple more points. Like that line probably should have been 6 last week against the Raiders. Like they still wouldn't have covered it, but that original line of 6.5 does seem, now that we've seen the game, seem a little bit more appropriate, right? Like,
Totally.
obviously extra points that were getting thrown around to Carolina a few weeks ago, where it was double digits. And it was like, that probably should have been less than 10. So in this case, this line should probably be less than 3 with Kansas City on the road in a game that they don't really need, right? And so, yes, you have the short week or whatever, but again, it's the short week with Tampa staying at home. So it's not really that much of a short week, if you know what I mean. And from Kansas City's standpoint, right, like, that was a big game for them against the Raiders, right? We talked about it last week, how that was a bust out the good stuff type of a game. This game, not that important, right? Because it's an interconference game here where it's like, okay, we're playing an NFC team that's not even the best NFC team. Like, you could totally slip up here. You've already won the division with that win last week, and there's, like, maybe you're trying to catch Pittsburgh. Of course, you're trying to catch Pittsburgh here, but I just think this is one that the Chiefs could give up here, or at least, it couldn't be another situation where it's a 3-point game kind of going either way. And maybe it lands on them winning by 4 the same way that it just landed on them winning by 4 against Vegas. But like, that wasn't a 4-point win in the same way that like a 4-point win could kill us here if we bet Tampa Bay. I think at 3.5, it's just an automatic bet that you have to make. And it does feel a little bit like you're holding your nose here as well. But, value is value.
Value is value. The one weird thing about watching Brady last week, I think I saw the stat. It was like, of the 80 whatever plays they ran, they had like 6 motion plays in terms of like pre-snap motions. And this might be a little too inside football, but like, you run the motion so that Brady can see if the defense is in zone or man-to-man. They didn't do that. Hence, how many plays you saw my guy just throw it up and the safety's just chilling and getting the ball. But anyways, we'll move on because I don't want to rag on Brady and Tampa Bay too much. And the Chiefs thing, I'm just riding with the Chiefs. That's all I'm doing, and admitting that I could be wrong very easily here, but I'm okay with going with the Chiefs. Moving on to the Bills. 7-3 Buffalo Bills coming off a bye week, and they are hosting, I know, your favorite squad, the Superchargers, at 3-7. The Bills are favored by 5.5 points. And I know I talked about Josh Allen before, throwing some shade, but off a bye, they should be able to handle the Chargers. But I also think 5.5 is way too many points, especially against Herbert, who is becoming one of my favorite players to watch just because my guy is just sick. 5.5 points. I'm leaning towards taking the 5.5 points and hoping that maybe, just maybe, this might be the week that the Chargers don't get a punt blocked.
Well, yeah, at this point, you have to factor that in, right? Like, the handicap is, okay, well, Chargers have to give them 7 points right off the bat because they can't execute a punt. So let's just, okay. And they're probably going to give them 3 to 4 points at the end of the game because they're going to botch the clock and their defense is going to be exhausted. And so it's like, okay, well, what are we working with here? Listen, we don't want to be laying points with Anthony Lynn, right? Like, we've established that. It didn't, it was never going to work out last week, even though in a game that they should have won by 50 points. Like, they should have beat the Jets by 1 billion points, right? But because they're poorly coached, like, that's where it's going to end up. But from a talent standpoint, you talked about Herbert, you can go down the line here. It's the team's too good not to take points with.
Exactly.
And so, we do want to look at the weather, right? We always talk about the Bills and the weather. It looks to be, pretty decent, right? 8 degrees, Celsius, some sunshine in, at least in Toronto on Sunday. So I assume it's going to be relatively close to that in Buffalo. I like the points here just because, like, every game that Anthony Lynn's involved, one way or another, is going to be a 1-score game. And whether they win or lose, right, we're getting a lot of the results of a 1-score game there. Sure, Buffalo could win by 6. And listen, we'll probably wait and see if we can get 6 with the Chargers. But then they could win by 7, of course, maybe, 8 points, et cetera, et cetera. From an on-field standpoint, right, like, the Buffalo defense, still not very good, right? And so the Chargers are going to be able to move the ball. Maybe they're in a position where they're down 10 and are moving the ball late to try to get inside the number. I just think there's a ton of different ways that the Chargers can win this game and that they can cover, and of course cover this game as well. Like, the Bills aren't, this is a throw the records out because I don't know that the Bills are that much better if really at all better than the Chargers are. It's really just fundamentally like the coaching that's going to get you the wins at the end of the game, right? That's going to execute the correct plays, whether it's intentionally getting, penalized, whether it's manipulating your timeouts correctly, whether it's running the correct play, to kill time. All of that stuff is going to get the Bills the win at the end, but that's not going to really get them the cover. It's going to be one team playing much better. In the NFL these days, when you're giving out points, to take a favorite at anything higher than 3, like, frankly, you got to be kind of crazy to do it, because there's so many ways that these games stay close, or at least get close at the end. So I think this is Chargers or nothing. The bye week doesn't do anything for me when it comes to the Bills. And I think plus 5.5, plus 6. I think that's where you want to be here with the Chargers. It's tough to do, but again, this is a good team that's hung on the road against good teams. So we talk about it every week, right?
For sure, totally. You mentioned if you want to take a favorite by more than 3 points, you were saying?
Yeah.
You got to be very careful here. And that leads us to our next game, because there's a favorite in terms of the 7-3 Seahawks, who are 6-point favorites against the bane of my existence, the Philadelphia Eagles. As yet again, I was suckered in to ride in with Carson Wentz and company, and then hate watching that game of Carson Wentz and Baker just trading turnovers in the rain in Cleveland. But here we are again, and there's no logic should tell me that I should take the Eagles, right? Just because the points, again, it's a lot of points, but I can't do it, and I'm not going to do it. I'm just not going to do it. I'm on the Seahawks, 6 points. Now, the Seahawks played last Thursday. Now they're playing on a Monday, so that's a long time off to, maybe rest up, heal up, figure some things out. Maybe watch some game tape of how you can also disrupt. Like, I'm just seeing Jamal Adams making plays and just dreaming of strip sacking Carson Wentz, right? Like, that's all I'm envisioning right now.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I don't see how I'm not taking Russ, DK, and company to win by 6. I'm just in on it because I cannot be on the side of Carson Wentz.
Yeah, I mean, what am I going to tell you, right? Hey, let's all bet the Eagles. Like, yes, you're supposed to bet the Eagles here, right? This is the same situation as, you're supposed to take the points with the Raiders against the Chiefs. And, we talked about the Sunday night football, like the string of Sunday night football games of people just getting suckered in to taking the favorite. And in this case, all the money is going to be on Seattle. It's Russell Wilson against Carson Wentz. That used to be sort of a put it on a poster thing that, was a playoff matchup last year. Remember that? And then, Wentz gets hurt and it goes to hell in a handbasket, right?
Last year seems like a memory, too far away.
Right. Yeah, back in 2019, 25 years ago. Actually, no, that would have been 20. That would have literally been in 2020. So, point is, though, you're supposed to bet the Eagles here, but if I didn't swear off before last week, luckily I ended up getting there with the teaser number that we talked about. But I don't blame you, man, for just being like, you know what? It's the Seahawks, it's Russell Wilson. I'm not dealing with this Eagles team, but I know early money's come in on the Eagles. I know, maybe that's a setup. Who knows? Listen, with all the Thursday night games or Thursday games period, and of course all the Sunday games still to go, that Monday game feels like it's, speaking of, years from now, that one feels like years from now. Fundamentally you see the matchup and you know what you're supposed to do, but it would take me 5 days to get around to even considering betting the Eagles here. We'll see how the weekend goes.
See how we go.
But it's hard to pass on a Monday nighter, but I mean, there's no good options in this one.
Totally hear you. There's some pretty good options when we're talking about 2 7-3 teams in the Colts and Titans. The Colts, 3.5-point favorites in Tennessee. Now, this is the second time in 2 weeks that we've seen this matchup, as the Colts won 34-17 in Week 10. They're favored by 3.5 on Sunday. I'm forced to lean that way, but I got to ask, the obvious question is, has anything happened over the last 2 weeks that should be changing my point of view of these two teams?
That they start 0-0. You know what I mean? It's very easy to look at a score and be like, 41-24 or whatever it was. I think that's what the score was. And go, okay, well,
17, I think.
34, okay, 17-point game. And so, and look at that score and be like, oh yeah, like the Colts are going to win. Now they're at home, all of that sort of thing, right? But like, you do have to remind yourself, like they do start over. They do start 0-0. And so
there's some funky punts and there's some funkiness.
There was some funky stuff, but from a box score standpoint, like the Colts were the right side. You'll remember that the Titans opened as the favorite. Everybody loved the Titans at a short number, -1, -1.5. And then, fear struck everyone's heart as you watch that line go and make the Colts a -1. And we were on top of that. We took the Colts that day. We were all about it, right? And the box score showed us nothing that would indicate that that was necessarily the wrong side. But now you've got this different situation, right? 3.5 points. And so if you were watching that game and you're going, man, the Colts are the right side this whole way, but until that punt got blocked, it was still just a 3-point game. So again, very similar to like Baltimore and Pittsburgh, where you go, it's no guarantees that the Colts are going to have that yardage advantage for a second straight time, right? Like teams make adjustments, whether it's basketball, football, or whatever sport. You play a team, right? Whether it maybe like an NBA playoff series, right? You play a team, you go back, you look, what did we do right? What did we do wrong? And the team that lost will make changes. The team that won just does the same thing because it worked the first time. And so do I expect a ton of changes from the Colts? Not really. They're just going to kind of do what they do, rely on them just being good, and hopefully
Pittman wasn't there. Was Pittman there 2 weeks ago?
Pittman was there. Yeah.
He was there. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there isn't anything really massive with regards to changes. Actually, there might be a few more injury issues, right, with Tennessee. Both teams coming off mega dramatic wins last week. So there's no like spot situation, right?
Yeah. Derrick Henry, general, that run by Derrick Henry, that's like just... Whew.
And A.J. Brown had maybe the touchdown of the weekend that didn't involve
grown-ass man plays. Grown-ass man plays.
Absolutely, full-blown adult. And so you go, you know what, though? I think I'm taking the 3.5 here. This number was 4, so I think the books are sort of leaning towards your take on this. But I think the market has sort of said, whoa, easy, big fella. There isn't that much difference between the home fields here. And I don't know that Tennessee is necessarily a team that is downgraded because they're playing in a dome, right? Like this is a situation where both offenses should play really well. I think you'll get a better effort. And I don't mean effort as in like actual effort, but like you'll get a better showing here from Tennessee. And I think that 3.5 points in a game that, again, could kind of go either way, I think you have to actually take the 3.5 points here with Tennessee.
Okay. Interesting stuff. I'm also interested to see if you're interested in taking the points as the Falcons are home dogs, 3-point dogs to the Raiders. Raiders are 6-4, Falcons are 3-7. No such thing as moral victories in the NFL, but if there was such a thing, you might hand one to the Raiders for almost pulling it out against Chiefs. There's no moral victories, though, in gambling. So for us, Raiders, 3-point favorites in Atlanta. I want to take Atlanta so bad, but I need to know if Julio's playing, what Julio's injury status is. And I guess the bigger question, which we talked about last week or the week before, was, is it time that we just start buying into the Raiders?
Yeah, great question. Yes and no. It's circumstantial, right? And so, I should have mentioned this when it came to Houston and Detroit, but we always talk about everybody wants this team one week and then they don't want anything to do with them the next week, or vice versa. Nobody wants anything to do with this team and now they are all about this team, right? And a lot of times that's actually manifested itself in a trend. We don't do a ton of trend talk on this show because I don't really believe in a ton of trends. But this one is, I bring up that as a trend, but it can actually be manifested in the following. If a team is a road favorite, and then the next week is a road or home underdog, right? You can see the change in perception. And on the flip side, when it comes to the Raiders, this is a team that was a home underdog that's now going on the road and is a favorite. Now, obviously, the competition is different, and that's sort of why it goes from being an 8-point underdog to a 3-point favorite. But just the perception of, wow, they could hang with Kansas City. Let's make them a favorite here on the road in a game that was a pick'em last week, right? It was the projected look-ahead line was a pick'em, and they've now moved 3 points based on a game that they didn't even win necessarily. Exactly. Right? And so I think you're right. I think you do have to take the Falcons here +3. I think that's 3 good points of value here and important points in a Falcons team that, they moved the ball against the Saints, but they couldn't get it done in the red zone. But that's not what the matchup here is, right?
Yeah.
Like they're going to be able to convert those drives into touchdowns. And I think Julio Jones coming back into that game last week, I think hopefully that portends to him being able to play. It'd be nice if he and Ridley could play a full game together where one of them wasn't out. Yeah, I like the Falcons here +3. It's not an easy one, and I think you're sort of seeing a theme on the Sunday where I'm liking a ton of these underdogs. Like it's going to be a really messy week, I think, on the Sunday. Whereas on the Thursday, historically, I should have mentioned this again earlier, but like favorites crush on Thanksgiving Thursdays, like 70 to 75% in the last like 15 years, right? And so let's assume like you like Houston, you like Dallas, and we both like Pittsburgh, knock on wood, that maybe all of those teams get there from a favorite standpoint. And then I think Sunday just turns into an underdog bloodbath.
I like it. Interested to see if you like the Patriots as underdogs. They're home dogs to the Cards. Cards come in 2.5-point favorites at 6-4. Patriots, the reverse, 4-6. The Cards lost a close one to Russ last week on Thursday night, heading to New England to face Cam and the Pats, who had trouble stopping Deshaun Watson. And there's some similarities between, obviously, the scrambling ability of Deshaun Watson and Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray is receivers. Obviously, that's an upgrade in talent. I mean, yeah. They might have gotten a receiver from the Texans that has been doing a pretty good job.
Yeah.
But the point is, I just don't know if the Pats can keep up on offense with, I just don't see their defense being able to slow down the receivers of the Cards. And if that's the case, and we're watching Cam have to sit back and go for 300 yards again, he did it last week, but they didn't win, and it wasn't pretty. So 2.5 points, it's under a field goal. I'm okay taking the Cards here. What do you think?
Shell, do you hear that? Do you hear that? It's faint.
I don't
it's
know
off
if I
in the
can hear
distance. It's early on Wednesday, so it's hard to believe that there's some massive crimes being committed in the area. No, that's not the police. That's the alert. We've got a sucker bet of the week, everybody. Let's bring out the alert. Oh no, it's still just an apple. For those of you watching on YouTube, it's just an apple. It's not a siren. This is the sucker bet of the week, man. And this is exactly what we just talked about, right? It's I call it the lily pad, right? Where you go, Patriots have no shot against the Ravens, right? Everybody just forking money over on the Ravens. Patriots win that game. Everybody goes, how about these Patriots? They've got the Texans next week. Texans are garbage. Let's make them going from favorites. A home underdog to road favorites, right? Let's flip the look-ahead line from the Texans being favored all the way over to the Patriots being favored. And then guess what happens? The Texans win the game. And everybody goes, it's over. Patriots are done. Get them out of here. And let's go back. They head back home. And now look at what we've got here. Underdogs against the Cardinals. And listen, from a big picture standpoint, I think as low on the Cardinals as anybody, right? And the Kyler Murray thing is very exciting. He's very scary every time he gets the ball. But when are we going to see the wins actually come? And I don't mean like wins and losses, because they have a decent record. I believe 7-4, 6-4. That's right. But it's like, okay, one of those is a Hail Mary, so this is really about a 5-5 team, right? We still have losses on the board here, at home losses to Detroit. By the way, probably shouldn't have won that game against Seattle the first time around. So now we're looking not at a 5-5 team, a 4-6 team. And you're not wrong, right? The handicap last week was, what would you rather go against? The worst run defense in the league or the worst pass defense in the league? Because everybody was talking about the Texans' run defense, and everybody was willing to just ignore the fact that the Patriots have a really bad pass defense. So yes, of course, Deshaun Watson played really well. The difference in this one for me is, you watch the Texans, and they have, like, for all of the lack of DeAndre Hopkins, and it's phenomenal that you brought this up, the point for the Texans was, we're going to have 4 or 5 guys that we can throw it to, right? So they were firing around to the tight end all day long, right? That's the guy that made the big difference for them. And they were popping it around to all of their 4 quality wide receivers. Nobody on the level of DeAndre Hopkins. Well, you go and you take the Cardinals and you replace them in there for the Texans. And I think the matchups actually work okay here for the Patriots, right? Like Stephon Gilmore, who missed 3 games, which of course is going to accumulate some bad stats when your best player is out of the games. Mm-hmm. Now he gets to go one-on-one against DeAndre Hopkins, right? And I'm not saying he's going to shut him down, but like those one-on-ones are going to be a lot difficult. And there has been times this season where Kyler Murray has shied away from throwing to DeAndre Hopkins in tough matchups, right? I think of the Miami game with Xavier Howard, right? They were able to get a bunch of pass interferences on Xavier Howard that were pretty suspect. But, now you get, a road game. We talked about it last week, right? Like the Cardinals finally go on the road. There wasn't even that much in the way of weather in Seattle. And I don't know that there's even going to be that much in the way of weather in New England. And so can they stop the offense? If you can sort of single up DeAndre Hopkins with Stephon Gilmore, now you have the rest of the offense to worry about. And the rest of that offense is pretty washed up Larry Fitzgerald and Christian Kirk on long bombs. Well, you still have some veterans in that secondary that I like to think aren't going to have these coverage botches that some of these teams have when Murray's going to be able to, move the ball. The run game, always going to be an issue, right? Kyler Murray's always going to be able to skedaddle his way out of the pocket and burn you for some runs. So let's go and look and say, all right, New England's going to give up points to Arizona just sort of based on that, and because the defense isn't going to just turn around overnight. Can they score against Arizona? Well, talked about it last week, right? The big injury that nobody talked about because nobody's really that up to date on the Cardinals D-line was Corey Peters, their nose tackle, 5-year veteran, played basically every snap of every game. Key to their run defense. Well, Seattle goes in and they go, we're going to test to see if the replacement guys are able to stop the run. And they couldn't. They couldn't, right? We had Bo Scarborough in the mix. We had your boy DJ Dallas, Thursdays and Friday nights over at the Country Bar in Scarborough and Pickering. And, he's working the ball on the ground. And so Carlos Hyde, thank you. He's in the mix. And so the Patriots, what are they going to want to do, right? They're going to want to run the football. So what is going to have been cleaned up in that week and a half from the Cardinals defense? It's nothing, right? Like it is what it is now because they are without that key run stopping force. And so you're going to see, the Patriots do what they're going to do. Big, unfortunate big miss of Rex Burkhead being out. That was maybe the grossest injury of the week, with apologies to Joe Burrow. That thing was hideous. He didn't even make the flight back. That's awful injury, awful for him, and it hurts the Patriots. But they'll be able to put Sony Michel back in, right? So this sort of underrated thing. He's off of IR. They didn't even use him last week because they have this cadre of running backs. So let's put all those cadre of running backs back in the mix. Maybe Cam Newton might actually run the ball this game. Maybe. And so, the Cardinals defense is really bad, but nobody talks about it because Kyler Murray and DeAndre Hopkins are on the poster here. So at +2.5, let's give it a second. Let's wait and see if we can get +3, right? Because again, sure, we're making picks, but at the same time, we're also, spending money and we want to get the right price. And if we see, again, it's Wednesday, if we see that everybody's piling in here on, against the Patriots on the Cardinals, we can get that +3. And I think that might be important, but hopefully it's not, because I think the Patriots win this game outright.
I like it. And for those who might be wondering, we don't really say beforehand we come on and do this podcast what's going to be the sucker bet of the week. You
don't know when the alert's going to come.
Right?
You don't know.
I'm just a sucker all the time. Just for the record, so that people might be wondering what goes on behind the scenes here. This is just how it works.
Nothing goes on behind the scenes.
Yeah. Things went well for the Rams. The Rams improved to 7-3 after a big win on Monday night, and now they host the 49ers, who are coming off a bye week. And the Niners are 7-point dogs, but the Niners always play the Rams tough. The other thing is the bye week, not all bye weeks are created equally, meaning when you have a good organization, a good structure in terms of great coaching, that bye week can be used for good. And with the Niners having the extra week, Raheem Mostert coming back, Debo might be coming back, this might just be too many points here, and I'm on the Niners against the Rams.
Yeah, and I think you're onto something here, right? And listen, guess what? Russell's on another underdog on Sunday. We always talk about like the NFC West cycle of doom, right? Like there's one team that owns another team, right?
Just
and
matchups.
In this case, it's just matchups. In this case, it's been San Francisco low key owning the Rams in the same way that the Rams own the Seahawks. And so, yes, I think you're right. +7, great buy. Terrible spot for the Rams, right? Coming off of that big win Monday night, back all the way across the country again, getting back fired up for a San Francisco team that, yes, has owned them, but they might be looking at this team going like, we're still not so sure that they're all that great, right? And San Francisco went into that bye week with a pretty good on-field performance against the Saints. Talked about it last week, how at less than 300 yards for each team, that game was way closer than the 14-point spread that it ended up being. And so I think you're right. San Francisco +7 here. They're going to be able to move the ball okay, but I think the defense always does what they need to do against the Rams so that this game ends up being pretty close. In the end, I like San Francisco +7 a lot. They're getting a little bit healthier. We may even see some Richard Sherman back into the mix, which would be helpful.
It's a name I haven't heard in a while.
Right, yeah. And so, like, the idea was he's coming back after the bye. Again, it's Wednesday. We'll have to see how all of this stuff plays out.
Yeah.
But, yeah, if they're getting, like you said, Deebo Samuel, maybe Raheem Mostert, you're getting some guys back here to kind of hang in with the Rams, a team that, they beat outright a couple of, a month and a half ago in a situation where nobody wanted anything to do with the 49ers then either.
It's true. Very true. And I'm not sure a lot of people want anything to do with our next team here because your man's Drew Lock is – I can't peg what's going on with that squad at all, but I will say that I do like them getting 6 points at home to the Saints. It's just begging me to take – the 6 points is just too much. It's just begging me to take the points. And you know what? I'm going to do it because this Taysom Hill thing, cool, fine and dandy, but I will never, ever buy in fully to these offenses where it's a straight gimmick. It's a gimmick offense. I'm never going to fully buy into it. I'm just not going to do it. I'm going to take the 6 points every time.
It's a janky offense situation. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, listen, you can watch the highlights and be like, oh, Taysom Hill really got it going, right? But again, watch the games, right?
Yeah.
First half of that game, you're going like, this is not working out. This is not working out at all. And there was yet another key play like the Lions-Panthers game, right? They hit Emmanuel Sanders on a long bomb. He gets up and starts running, and he gets stripped of the ball. Well, they go and they take a look at the replay, and it looks like one guy had a finger touch on Sanders while he was on the ground, and the Saints keep the ball. Well, of course, they go and they score, and from there it just went, absolutely another hell in a handbasket situation. So that game obviously a lot closer than the final score indicated. As far as Denver's concerned, I got to call you out a little bit on this one. The difference between you going 6-8 last week and 7-7 is not jumping on board with my Broncos pick. That is the difference. You could have had a 500 week.
It's a factual statement.
And again, I don't know that a ton of people necessarily were watching that game, but the Broncos absolutely destroyed the Dolphins on offense, on defense. Of course, Drew Lock threw the opening interception that the Dolphins always get. They always get the opening turnover. They always get the free 7 points. Tua always gets the touchdown pass before he even gets to 15 yards passing. And in that case, it didn't matter. Denver was yeah, that's fine. We're going to run it on you. Drew Lock's going to throw it on you. You're not going to be able to do anything on us. And Tua ends up getting benched. Now, listen, Saints defense, in theory, a lot better than the Dolphins. Well, I don't even know if it is a lot better. It's just, in theory, it's better. But this is kind of a tough spot, right? Where it's Falcons game and then another Falcons game, which, even though there's a discrepancy in the standings here, that's a rivalry, right? The Saints and the Falcons is a pretty heated rivalry. And now you throw in this, let's go to Denver game. And like you said, you've got Taysom Hill no longer in the comfy confines of the Superdome. And you were right. That 6 points is too high because that's ticked down here to 5.5 already. So, and that means something when it's a team that kind of nobody wants anything to do with when it comes to the Broncos. My line in this game was 3. And so I think you're getting a ton of value here on the Broncos. And I think that's what what the sort of market in a big way is seeing here. I think more tickets are going to be on the Saints. I think more money is going to be on the Broncos. And I think the Broncos are live for yet another win because as we talked about last week, the offense isn't as bad as one thinks because of, when you see Drew Lock, you see him throwing interceptions. The offense is better than people give it credit for. And when the offense is playing okay, that defense gets sparked a little bit, right? And they have, been without two of their best corners here and there throughout the season, and that's killed them. But those guys are back, right? Bouye and Callahan are back for the Broncos, and they absolutely shut down the Dolphins, and I think they can do the same thing to Taysom Hill here. I'm going back with the Broncos. There's going to be a point where we have to jump off this boat, right? It's just not quite yet.
I like it. And as we kind of close towards the end here, I'm going to just go through a couple just quick reads where I'm just going to say, this is what I'm thinking. This is what we're doing and moving on.
Speed round.
Speed round. You do not have to jump in at all. You can just tell me I'm crazy or not before we get to what I believe will be the survivor pick of the week. But in terms of the quick reads, we got the 4-7 Panthers, who are 4-point dogs in Minnesota against the 4-6 Vikings. I just think the Vikings are frauds, and Teddy Two Gloves on the road as an underdog. I like that, Mr. Cousins. That's just where I'm at. That's just where I'm thinking. But I know what you're going to say, or what you would say. This is exactly the overreaction to the Vikings last week, swinging back the other way to being like, oh yeah, they suck or whatever, but it's okay. I do not want to be on the side of Mr. Cousins.
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. You got it. That's exactly it,
it's
right?
Week 12.
It's week 12. You figured me out, right? This is the one favorite that I think I would take here with the Vikings, right? This is a classic bounce back spot, a team that didn't play all that badly last week, which is why I think Dallas is a pretty decent team. And listen, I completely get it. Teddy Bridgewater back, the underdog stats, all of that sort of thing, right? But that 1:00 Viking spot here, to me, it just reeks as a bounce back.
Okay. Will the Jets finally bounce back as they are 7-point dogs at home to the Dolphins? I know Tua struggled, but if you could pick any team to bounce back against, who would it be? You might say the Jets. And I know it's 7 points. 7 points might be a lot, but is this the Jets' last chance to possibly get a win? And this might be, the time that if you were to take the Jets plus the points, this would be it?
There's a couple of spots on the schedule where they could mix in a win, right? Like there's a Vegas home game. There's a Cleveland game in there.
Okay.
That being said, right, like Tua's going to play.
Yeah.
It hasn't looked great offensively really since he started, right? When he's had to do anything. Now, is this going to be a situation where he doesn't have to do anything? Is Joe Flacco going to give the opening touchdown away? Like now, it's these two forces coming together for the same goal, and that is to give up an early defensive touchdown, right? Like, Flacco is going to want to do it, and the Dolphins are going to want to take advantage of it. So they may just start off the game by literally just handing the Dolphins the ball, have them run down and score, almost just as a formality to be like, all right, let's just begin up 7, and like that's perfect for the point spread that is sitting on 7 here. That being said, again, it's Wednesday, long week to go here. We may have a Sam Darnold sighting. He may be on his way back. And in which case, I think, right, what have we been waiting for when it comes to the Jets offense? Sam Darnold and his 3 wide receiver weapons, right? It's always been one guy out, right? Mims to start the season wasn't around, right? Crowder in and out of the lineup. What if we get Sam Darnold and that offense, and we get sort of a janky, again, game that is sort of first 1 to 20 because the Dolphins offense just isn't putting it together, right? Like the run game's not doing it. The other thing is, right, when we talk about bad teams getting a chance to win, and in this case, their first game, we want to be going up against a bad run defense. Now, like we talked about with the Houston thing, it's like, okay, it's not that big of a deal, especially if the other team's bad at pass defense. Yeah. But in this case, like, what's the easiest thing for a quarterback to do? It's to turn and hand the ball off. Bad news is you're turning and handing the ball off to Frank Gore, but at least he can get you 4 yards. And if the run defense stinks, that maybe turns into 5 yards. And if now we're working with a 5 yards per carry type situation, now we're able to open up some other stuff for, again, hopefully Darnold. Now, if Darnold is in, I see the line probably dipping off of 7 and coming down a little bit. But I'm just going to say it. I think the Jets might actually win this week. And if you were looking for a survivor pick, like this is the addendum to this is like survivor and sucker bet, like coming into one.
Yeah.
I'm telling you right now, do not take the Dolphins in survivor. Your chance to take the Dolphins was last time they played the Jets.
We're trying to win survivor here. I'm joking.
Right.
I'm joking.
If you're in Shell's pool, take the Dolphins. And listen, a ton of people are going to take the Dolphins on Sunday and survivor as well, man. Like they just are.
For sure. Totally. No, I totally understand it. And it's funny because I did take the Dolphins the last time they played against the Jets. And this time around, it's like, I don't know. I don't know about this time around either. So yes, all joking aside, I would encourage people to pause if you're going to take the Dolphins against the Jets in your survivor pool this week. We'll get to who I will probably take a little later on. But a couple more quick reads here. You got the Giants as 5.5-point favorites in Cincinnati. I don't like taking Danny Dimes by more than 5.5 points. I don't even know who's starting for the Bengals. So it seems kind of weird to just take the Bengals and the points. So I guess very
quick as part of the speed round here. It was announced about an hour before we started the show, maybe even a little bit less, right? That the Bengals less than a half of football. They have already seen enough of Ryan Finley. He is not starting. They are bringing up Brandon Allen from the practice squad. So I do have a little bit of a trivia question for you, right? Brandon Allen's coming in and he's going to start. He's going from practice squad right into starting, which is awesome because it's hilarious. And trivia question for you. How many games in his career has Brandon Allen started? Not Kyle Allen, by the way, everybody. Not Josh Allen, but like the black sheep non-brother, Brandon Allen. How many games has Brandon Allen started in his NFL career?
In his NFL career?
Yeah, NFL
I'd
career.
say 0.
He started 3 games last year. For the Denver Broncos, right? When Drew Lock got hurt, Drew Lock came back for those last 5 games and everybody got excited because they won 4 of them. But there was that meaty part of the season where it was just like Flacco had a neck injury, Lock wasn't good enough, or was injured. And they were looking around going like, anybody want to start a game? And Brandon Allen started 3 straight games. He even came in and got a win in his first start at home against Cleveland, took a 20-0 lead at Minnesota, 20-0.
Okay.
They blew the game. They lost the game 27-23 because Minnesota scored 3 touchdowns in the fourth quarter. And then they got smoked by the Bills, and we never saw Brandon Allen again. He ends up in the deep recesses of the Bengals practice squad, and here he is back with a vengeance 1 year later, starting his 4th NFL game. Is that an improvement on Finley? Maybe it kind of has to be if they're willing to do this. But like if you're going to spend the entire week, listen, the line opened, or should have said the look ahead line with Burrow still healthy last week was like 3.5, right? Like makes sense. People think the Bengals are better than the Giants. I still probably would have been on the Giants. And now the line has moved all the way over to 5.5, 6, right? So are we going to spend our entire week trying to figure out if a 9-point swing is appropriate for these quarterbacks? Or can we just ignore that this game even exists? And so we've already kind of talked about it too much because I think the option is ignore that this game even exists.
You know what? I like it. I like it a lot. I would almost even ignore that this next game exists too, but bare minimum, it's a quick read. Jaguars at home, 7-point dogs to the Browns. I'm not sure that I trust Baker Mayfield to win a game by more than a touchdown. And I also have no idea how to rate the Browns after 3 straight weeks dealing with the Cleveland weather. So either way, I have no idea what to make of this game, but overall, I don't like taking the Browns by more than a touchdown. So I'm on the Jags. Do you have much there? We don't need to spend a lot of time there at all.
No, I will say, yes, first blush, I was like, yeah, Jags here, man. Like, we may even see some Gardner Minshew. Again, Wednesday, who knows what's going to happen the rest of us, right? So, yeah, tons of stuff to still kind of figure out with regards to that game. It's ticked off of 7 down to 6, 6.5. So, obviously, people are sort of in agreement that the Jaguars might be the right side here. We don't know what to do with the Browns because they haven't played in normal human being conditions the last 3 weeks, right? With these crazy winds, rain, all of this stuff. Is it going to be that situation where we talk about, oh, now they're in decent conditions and now the offense is clicking and Baker's able to throw the ball? If there was ever a team where that's going to work, it's probably the Jags, who are going to be probably, again, early week, probably going to be out with, again, 4 of their top 5 DBs, right? Mm-hmm. So that's going to make Baker Mayfield look pretty good here as well. So as much as I think on both sides, Myles Garrett out for Cleveland, Denzel Ward out for Cleveland, literally their 2 best defensive players. Yeah. So a ton of points are going to get scored here, you'd think. And does that mean that this game's close, or does this just mean like 42-28? I don't know, right? I don't know.
So I'm hoping that you do know if I will be making a good survivor pick here, as the Packers are, as you told me, 8.5-point favorites at home to the Chicago Bears. Now, we're into week 12, and normally you don't like taking divisional games in Survivor at all, but we're into week 12, so you got to make some exceptions somewhere. And when you look around at the schedule, I'm here on the Packers. Now, if you're telling me 8.5 points, that's a lot of points, but the Bears, and I mean, is Trubisky coming back? The Bears are coming off a bye. I haven't really heard much about the Trubisky train coming back into the station yet. So the 8.5 points, I guess I'll take the Packers, but definitely Survivor, I'm in.
Yeah, and so one of the reasons that we're doing this on Wednesday, of course, obviously, we got to talk about these Thursday games, right? Like, got to get in before Wednesday because there's 3 games on Thursday, got to do it. The other reason is if we did this on Friday, if we just let the Thursday games go and rescheduled it to Friday, there's a decent chance you'd have to pick me up with a snow shovel off the side of the road because that might mean that Pittsburgh lost, which means that we're out of Circa Survivor, which means that the whole strategy of us saving Green Bay through all of the Jags games and this game or that game that they've had that were relatively easy games that a lot of people used Green Bay to the tune of about 80% of Circa Survivor contestants have already used Green Bay. So part of our strategy was we're saving Pittsburgh and we're saving Green Bay, right? So we just need these 2 teams to get through. So yes, if we get through to Sunday, Green Bay is our play, has always been our play. If you are in a Survivor, which most people are, that doesn't have to deal with this Thursday, and you've been following along going like, why aren't these guys taking Green Bay? This is the reason. This is the one spread that is over 7 points. We will take our chances. From a handicapping standpoint, I'm not betting this game because of what we'll have sort of riding on it, but 8.5 is a ton of points. But what can the Bears do to take advantage of Green Bay? Because we always look for a team that can run the ball, right? Like that's how the Colts got back in the game last week. We weren't sure that they could run the ball. Sure enough, they could, because that's how bad the Packers' run defense is. Are the Bears going to be able to run the ball? They haven't been able to do it all season. Who knows if David Montgomery's back in the mix? Does that even matter? That's kind of a horror show. Obviously, the defense can always sort of keep them in a game here, but you do have Green Bay coming off a loss, right? So full focus always against the Bears, especially after you've lost a game here where, they're going to be fine when it comes to that division, right? Especially with Minnesota losing last week. So it isn't like we're worried about looking behind us here, but there's a ton still to be decided in the top echelon of the NFC, and they're going to be focused. And so I just hope it matters for us with regards to just needing them to win. I know that doesn't really help people or you when it comes to, making a bet on the spread here.
No, I'm not taking the Bears. I'm not taking the Bears.
Quarterback-wise, Foles, Trubisky, the market doesn't seem to really care all that much which guy it is. Maybe it's even Tyler Bray, at which point I think you do have to care at that point. But it can't get any worse, right, than the Bears looked on Monday night. And so to be honest with you, we're probably at the low point for the Bears, which is actually, for us, means buy. So plus 8.5 actually would be the play that I think you have to make. But again, we hopefully will have so much invested already in the Packers that it won't come to that.
I got you. And that wraps up another week. So much goodness. There's 16 games this week, which is great for football fans everywhere. Football starting on Thursday, full day games. Then obviously Sunday, the normal action. And you know what? We'll be back on Monday as we discuss on Mr. Russell's podcast, which is the Window Sports Betting Podcast, as we recap every Monday the football action so far. Give some people some more information. I know you got a lot of stuff going on quickly here as we wrap up, but college basketball's back, and I think that might be a big deal on the Window podcast, if I know you well.
It's funny that you bring that up, and it's depressing, so I won't get too deep into it. But I talked about it yesterday on the podcast, so it's fair that you haven't caught up. I'm really bummed out. I'm really bummed out about where we're headed here with all of the virus stuff and game cancellations. NFL, the college football season hasn't been any fun with regards to handicapping or sort of waking up on Saturday and going like, who's out? How many guys? Where's the line moving? Did I get value? Did I not get value? And the idea of doing that every day in a serious way and then sort of telling people, oh, you should bet this team or that team today doesn't really make a ton of sense. So I'm treating this sort of, the non-conference season that is usually really fun, right? You get all these fun tournaments, Atlantis and Maui and all of these other crazy tournaments. They're all in the middle of the day on Wednesday. Like, it's great, right? And we're getting basketball. I'm going to be watching basketball. Don't you worry about that. But I'm treating this month essentially leading into conference play as a preseason. So nothing crazy when it comes to that. But it also means that you didn't miss out on a college basketball preview. We might just be doing sort of a mid-season preview once we get a better footing here on what's going to be involved, right?
I like it.
As for this week, really exciting. Talked about it a little bit. The Wednesday show, today's show, should be out around 3 o'clock if you've already listened to this, or if if it's after 3 o'clock, it should be open. Dave Tooley. So I, readily admit, completely don't know what to make of these Thursday games. He's going to come on and we're going to ask his opinion about these Thursday games. He's making the final decision on our Circa Survivor pick, so that's going to be worth it just to see if he, indeed takes the Steelers. If he doesn't, maybe it turns into an argument. I have the utmost respect for him, so that should be really sort of fun to watch me kind of tippy-toe around that potentially. But he's going to break down these Thursday games. Hopefully he's got a little bit more of a clearer mind on these games than I do because, again, he's been doing this a lot longer than I have, as hard as that maybe is to believe. So it's called the Window Sports Betting Podcast. Just type that into all of your searches, anywhere you get podcasts. For those of you on YouTube, I'm firing off, this is what it looks like. Boom. And check us out. No podcast on Thursday because it's all about the football on Thursday, but we're back on Friday with our big handicapping breakdown, right? That's where we get sort of all of the answers, or as many of the answers as we can with regards to these injuries and all of that stuff. And we go game by game and break it all down. Last week's was my Rembrandt, if you will. And so we're riding pretty high after last week, and fun times here as we battle for Circa Survivor and Circa Million in the big Las Vegas contests.
Sounds good, my dude. And again, make sure you like and subscribe to the Window Sports Betting Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Same place that you get this, the On Blast Podcast. Like and subscribe. Tell your friends on Apple, Spotify, SoundCloud, Google Play, and YouTube. You can find me on Twitter at Sheldon Alexander. You can find Mr. Russell on Twitter at MRussAuthentic. And of course, as I always close each and every week, I used to pray for times like this to rhyme like this. This is, I'll name this football pod later, part of the On Blast Podcast Network. As always, unpolished and unapologetic. Until next time, see ya.
On Blast.